Thank you, Adam, so much for being here with us today. We're going to get started. And can you please first tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're all about, what makes you tick?
Sure. So that's such a big question. I started as a classroom educator. I'm from New York. I was a high school English teacher way back when. I wound up working as a TOSA, a technology training specialist for a school district, and then wound up doing a stint as a technology director for 18 schools that were across the country. And then throughout that period, I got really into building education technology companies. I did a lot of speaking on EdTech topics and talking about how education technology could augment and enhance education. So really passionate about EdTech, been in the space for a while, have built a number of tools, EduTecher, EduClipper, We Learned It, and most recently I'm the co-founder and CEO of BreakoutEDU. So just been doing lots of stuff in the EdTech space and just love learning and love sharing new ideas with folks.
Wow, you have just like an amazing portfolio of things that you've accomplished in your life. And what kind of brought you to EdTech in the first place?
We need to step it up.
Yeah.
we need to do more. I cut the grass today.
Well, that's good. That's good. And I've got 400 years on you, Marcus. So you're good. You're all in good time.
So he's also made a time travel machine then, I'm guessing, because
that's right. There you go.
Brilliant.
So what brought you to this EdTech in the first place? What kind of was your step off point from those TOSA roles and that teaching role?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like it wasn't intentional. There's a lot of people that have sought out advice from me in terms of like, I want to make that move. For me, it was almost accidental. I was working as an adjunct professor at Hunter College and wound up teaching the graduate level course that I had just taken. So I basically walked out of the course. They're like, would you like to teach this next semester? And I'm like, sure. So I wound up teaching about education technology and how tools could help augment special education technology specifically. And one of the things I started doing was collecting tools that I would share with my students. And because I had a really terrible memory and I didn't want to do anything like formal blogging or anything like that at the time, I just started building my own website. So I built this thing called EduTecher, which was literally designed for 30 kids or 25 kids that were, kids, young adults that were taking this course with me. And then very quickly I realized like, oh, it's the internet. Like somehow people put it on Twitter, and this was like early Twitter days, like 2017. And, wound up finding that there was a resource that would help people. So I spent a tremendous amount of time over the next 5-6 years building what wound up being a custom social network. It was the first iOS app for teachers, focused on tools. I made training videos and a whole bunch of things that really were focused on finding new tools, which I found really exciting. And I was still working as the TOSA at the time and with students. And so I would wind up basically doing research and then helping myself and others at the same time. And then from there, it just kind of evolved. I really fell in love with the EdTech space, made a tremendous amount of really close and wonderful friends that I, to this day, I'm still extremely, extremely lucky to have them as friends, but also just respect their careers and the paths that they've taken, whether it be in the classroom or people that have gone on to other things as well. So yeah, it's been a crazy accidental journey, so to speak.
Same. I kind of feel that way about how I got to where I am. I too fell into the EdTech world from a suggestion. Somebody suggested, you should lead the PD on technology. And so I started leading professional development. And next thing you know, I'm doing it professionally.
That's awesome.
I love how organic your origin story is for EdTech. I also love that, like Chelsea and I, you're a former teacher.
Yep.
Yeah. What did you teach, Marcus? And what did you teach Chelsea?
I taught kindergarten, but then I also taught K-5, and then I also went back to kindergarten, so lower elementary.
Like you, Adam Bellow, I taught high school English.
Amazing.
Yes. We'll get into the similarities shortly, but but I want to bring it back to today's topic, today's theme, which is about teachers going beyond engagement and focusing more on student empowerment. So before we go too deep, I'd like for you to clarify the difference between engagement and empowerment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a wonderful, wonderful question. And I feel like there's a lot to that answer. I feel like engagement is definitely something we strive for in the classroom. We want kids to be engaged. We want people to be sitting up and paying attention and being invested in what they're doing. You can be engaged, though, watching some sort of YouTube video or engaging in content like a educational game quiz. It holds your attention. You're engaged to a point for a certain amount of time. I think empowerment is really kind of that holy grail of where we're trying to get these kids to go, where it's being able to advocate, being able to kind of see why things matter to themselves, and being able to kind of take the charge and make the learning happen as an active participant, as opposed to you can be engaged and passive at the same time. I'm engaged when I'm playing a video game, but I'm not fully, there's an element that's not fully present. And I think that empowerment is when you're able to make those decisions, when it matters more, and you understand that it's a bigger part of just the learning process as opposed to something that you're marshaling through.
Like you said, a lot to unpack. It was almost like a loaded question. I'll apologize for it now because there's layers and layers and layers and layers to it, like you said. But the one thing I did sort of pick up from what you're saying is that empowerment is when you act and you're more of an agent in the learning, as opposed to you could passively engage in something. You could sit there and watch SpongeBob all day and be engaged with SpongeBob, but that doesn't mean you're empowered and you're actively participating in that. So my next question is kind of like a follow-up, is why does empowerment matter? Because when I was in the classroom, it was like engage, engage, engage. I don't even think anybody mentioned the word empowerment until after I left the classroom. That was not a buzzword when I was teaching. So I want to know, why is empowerment so important?
Yeah, I mean, I think empowerment's important because every student should have agency. The real life is not school. And I think that and I'm the father of a child that has special needs. And I think that, one of the big things that we work on just personally is agency and being able to advocate for oneself and being empowered in a situation to kind of know your contribution, know your value, and also know when you need assistance. And I think, empowering our learners, there's a lot, it goes to I always think to the argument of PBL, where it's learning that matters when it's projects that are not recipe projects, but it's actually hey, there's an actual problem and you have to come up with a solution. It matters so much more to those learners because they are literally empowered to not only find the solution, not only do the work and do the thing that is being asked of them, but they are actually empowered to do something that has meaning and gravitas that is beyond oh, okay, you're going to do this and it's a grade. And so I think that empowerment really shows the learners of all ages, as young as those kindergartners that you were teaching, Chelsea, and as old as the teachers themselves that are now, not to say any teacher is old, but, you should be understanding that what you do has value, what you do has meaning, and what you do has consequence. And I think that that's, truly important for all learners to understand from a young age so that they are able to kind of, see the learning and see the process as not just something that they have to go through, but they're actually an active part of. So it goes back to active engagement, right? I mean, they're actively engaged in being empowered through, to make a valid contribution or change.
I'm firing. My neurons are just so activated because you brought up PBL. So project-based learning, for those of you who haven't touched it, don't know what PBL is. That's a really good kind of right there type of thing that a teacher could try to give kids more empowerment in their learning, is try something that's not a recipe canned project. Open it up, look up some PBL ideas and let these kids have some agency in the concepts that you're trying to teach. I like that. So PBL, write that down, y'all. Write that down.
And Marcus, I was thinking back to the one episode that we did, and you were talking about your rock show that you put on when you were a student because you loved rocks. So you did a whole project about rocks, and your teacher gave you that opportunity to do it the way you wanted to do it. And it also made me think of my brother. He hated the traditional classroom setting. He wanted to play his guitar. He didn't want to sit there. He's too smart to sit there. So my mom ended up pulling him out into a charter school where he got to choose what courses he was taking. It was mostly at home, 1 day a week at the school, but he got to do all of the own lessons. Like if he took a cooking class, so that was just him teaching himself how to cook. But it empowered him to do the learning that he wanted to do, still get his high school diploma, but in a non-traditional way. So those were the two things that what you just said made me think of. And since you and me and Marcus are in the EdTech world, what role does technology play in helping teachers empower their students?
It's such a good one. And I feel like my opinion on this has really evolved over time. I think that's, when I first started, I was so focused on the tools, and it's funny because both of us, you guys work at CAMI, I'm working at Breakout and building an EdTech, entity, right? Like I'm working on products. And I think that, it's really important to see those and their place in the classroom. And that's how my lens has kind of changed. Originally, it was very focused on like, hey, this is a cool tool that, either is a replacement for something that exists that is traditional. And I didn't necessarily think whether it's good or bad. It just was something that people were doing. So it's like, I'll just use this as a replication tool. I've looked at it much more, deeply over the last probably decade as something that's augmentative. So technology can provide students with an opportunity to interact with or create, more importantly, things that didn't exist before and that they couldn't do in a different way. So it's not just like, they have access to all the information and content or whatever. It's like, it's literally, and CAMI is a good example because you can interact with the tool. You can interact with something that ordinarily is static and very different. And, the technology itself, I think, allows for that next level thing. For example, so I created a product about a long time ago now called We Learned It. And it was a really kind of multimedia based like presentation tool. And the idea is that it was going to be for project-based learning. It was going to be a portfolio that would grow with students over time. And the feedback mechanisms were all, teachers could annotate and narrate on top of the students' work. And students could record video notes and they can record audio notes. And like it was very, very multidimensional, whereas most of the stuff at the time was a comment in a Google Doc or you could snap a picture or something and upload it, like that was kind of as cutting edge as it was at the time. But it's really about like the technology that you then could have students drawing on top of their iPad to kind of annotate and walk you through any sort of presentation, was really that next component. And so that's what I hope technology provides going forward is like that extra layer on top. And it's an essential piece. It's not, let me take that back. It's not the layer on top. It's really the essential kind of glue that holds together what you're asking the student or the learner to do and make. And that next level opportunity for them to create something different and meaningful, hopefully.
Yeah. And it gives them that freedom to do what they want to do or how they see that project being. It doesn't limit them in a piece of paper that they're drawing a picture and writing documents. And actually, shameless plug to CAMI, all of those tools that you just mentioned, we do have that within CAMI. So students do get that freedom when they're given a document to add. They can add a video, they can add voice comments, they can interact, all those different kinds of things that they can do. And use it as a presentation tool, all those things. And teachers can, like you said, give them that empowerment, give them an assignment, kind of set them free and say, these are the tools you have, do it how you want to do it. It's very awesome.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the technology component there, but I think that the teacher component is the same like level of importance. So, Marcus, the rocks presentation.
You have to listen to the episode. You have to listen to it.
Okay.
I don't even. What's this? It was good. We were talking to Jerry Cheng, gifted teacher.
Jerry Cheng, yes.
About things that happen in a gifted classroom, and I was a gifted kid, and when we learned the unit on rocks, so igneous, sedimentary, metamorphic, we did a rock concert where we remixed the song and we took the rocks and painted them and we put like hair on them. One of them had like a ponytail and like we put an aluminum disco ball. But like that, I think is a good example of me being an agent, being somebody who says, okay, this is what I have to learn. You know what excites me? Rock music, concerts, disco balls.
Yeah.
So it's almost
Do you know
like,
how I know it worked? Do you know how I know it worked? You still know all of those names of the rocks. I could not just sling
right.
out names of rocks, but you know them. You learned through that lesson.
That's right. And I think it's a credit to the teacher, right? That let you have that experience where it's like, you can express yourself in this way. And listen, it's tough. I think, especially, it's dichotomous that we have all the technology to do these really immersive interactive projects. Kids could build stuff in Minecraft and they could build a Breakout game and there's a lot of opportunity for them to do different technical and digital type projects. There's a lot of stuff, but it also for the teacher means that there has to be openness for that to be a meaningful form of their understanding and learning. And, you need to have both. And I kudos to your teachers way back when, and kudos to all those teachers now that are allowing not just like a, hey, do the worksheet type mentality, to allowing students to show their understanding and their comprehension of the content.
Keeping the conversation going about tech, I want to add on to some things that you just shared. Let's just state the obvious. There is a lot of tech in today's classroom. There's a lot of stuff. There's technology everywhere now. So what are some things that you would say a teacher needs to keep mindful when choosing what to pick and use when they're focusing on empowerment?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good question. My biggest tip for that would be to choose one thing at a time. I think a lot of times, teachers, they go to the mandatory PD once a year, or they'll go to a conference and they'll sit through a session of 55 tools to use in your classroom today. And I think that the best of intentions to try to integrate all of these cool things. And the truth is, a lot of them are very cool and they're worth trying. But I think that the measured idea of how to try them one at a time and be able to kind of go through an evaluation process for if it works for you as an educator, and equally importantly, obviously, if it works for your students in their learning environment. There are certain apps and tools that I think are really incredible in terms of the value that they bring. But you then have to think of your school, and you think about the kids that you serve. Are you in a classroom where they don't have access to one-to-one iPads and all these other additional technology components that are specific to a device? Technology is very seductive in that way, where it does. I'm a giant nerd and I love looking at the new augmented reality stuff, and I look at all like I love all the toys and the gadgets and all that stuff. But I think it's really important to kind of evaluate it through a lens of, A, is this appropriate for my class, and whether that be what they have access to, and most importantly, like will it actually bring more to the classroom, to the learning experience beyond the momentary engagement. You think back to interactive whiteboards, not picking on any particular brands, but it was a giant trend in the early 2000s to put a whiteboard in every single room. And I was training people on how to use them effectively, but I saw many, many classrooms where literally it was just used as a projector, because the training, we didn't have time to evaluate what to do with these things. So the money was spent, the district bought onto it, they had the training, all that stuff, but the teacher themselves had no agency as the teacher to determine what was going to be useful and helpful for their classroom. And I think that the technology, especially the technology now, allows those students to create. The more tools that allow students to actually create and make something is really where you start transferring that ownership of learning. Because getting a kid to take a quiz online and hit the same buttons that all their peers are and just trying to do it faster for an assessment is not as exciting to me as building their own game, or building, something that has intrinsic value to both them as a engaged learner, and also shows off what they comprehend from the content they've interacted with, as well as any additional things they bring to the table.
Y'all, I want y'all to rewind that whole section over and over, because that's huge. We know you have a lot of stuff, teachers. We know sometimes it's hard to choose what to use and when, and then you feel bad because you got stuff collecting dust in the closet, and there's stuff you don't use. And I think what you said, Adam, is important. You don't have to use it all at the same time. Like, one thing at a time. And ask yourself, as you're using the stuff, does it make sense? Like, am I giving the kids something to create or do? Am I giving them room to be empowered, or am I just using it for them to click the same buttons that the rest of the, like, I love that. So please hit rewind.
And Adam, you mentioned BreakoutEDU as your latest creation. So it's a platform that incorporates games into learning, which sounds awesome to me. I wish I had it when I was in school, but also when I was teaching. Can you tell us more about it, and also why games in education?
Sure. So let me start at the end of that with why games in education, and then I'll talk more about Breakout a little bit. But I think that it goes back to that original question that Marcus asked about engagement and empowerment. Games, when we hear the word games, we think of, either Mario Brothers, or, if you're old like me, or you think of, kids today think of Minecraft, or they think of Fortnite or anything else like that. And I think games get a bad rap because we see them as like popcorn, almost like the big superhero movies. Like, they're engaging, they're entertaining, and they're not much value add beyond that. With Breakout, the approach is actually extremely different from traditional games in education. The idea was born out of the escape room. So, at an escape room, for those that have not done it, is basically, usually these are like strip malls. You pay like $30 or $50 to get locked in a room, literally, with strangers or friends. And then you have to solve really, really hard problems to break out of the room. So your challenge is to think as hard as you can to solve these really complex things. Sometimes they involve history, sometimes they involve, language. And, that is basically what we want kids to do in classrooms. So that's how the idea for Breakout started. My co-founder went to an escape room and said, hey, kids don't work this hard in classes. Why shouldn't we figure out a way to harness that excitement and really engagement and ownership of learning? Because it's not a teacher telling them what to do. It's literally they figuring out with their peers what to do. So that's what Breakout is based on. We sell a product that's a box with a series of locks. There's 2,000 games that you can play with the same setup. And so teachers set up these boxes, and they basically, the old EdTech adage of you want to be the sage on the stage versus the guy, you want to be the guide on the side versus the sage on the stage. Well, in Breakout, that really is forced to be true, because as a facilitator of the experience, you do have to watch your kids learn. And it is the most amazing experience to see how these kids think and go through the motions and experience this content. It's really just incredible. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. We have a digital game builder. So we have kids creating their own content. We have digital games. We have something called the Lock of the Day, which every day brings out a new piece of content for students to interact with. It's great for like do nows and bell ringers. And we're just warming up. There's a lot of really, really cool stuff that we're building for the coming year. But it is something that, is very simple in some ways, but it's very unique in the EdTech space. And again, I spent my early EdTech career cataloging literally over it. I think EduTecher had 1,600 tools, and I've watched very closely as all these other tools, even the ones that are in the gaming space, have come out. I still think that Breakout is I love watching people play Breakout. I love watching people participate in that, because they really have a relationship to the learning that is unlike anything else. So that's kind of a little bit about what it is. Obviously people can Google it and go to breakoutedu.com to learn more, but super fun to work on that and get to, one of my favorite things is looking on Twitter, and I'm sure you feel this way, with any product, right? So I'm sure with CAMI, you're looking at like the responses on Twitter and teachers posting pictures or kids saying like, it was great because I got to do, X, Y, and Z with the product. Every day I see hundreds of pictures of classrooms all around the world with kids playing games and having fun with, a very unique product. So it's super fun.
Yeah, that is so exciting. Actually, the highlight of my CAMI career so far was I got to help a little girl navigate CAMI. She was having some issues, and I hopped on a district call with them and figured it out. She was easily a first grader, and I hopped on. I didn't know the student was going to be there. And I'm like, oh my God, you're using
Oh, that's
CAMI.
amazing.
So I know your feeling of seeing those Twitter posts, because it definitely like brings like some happiness. And you just said they get to watch their students learning. What is like a sign that you're doing something right when you're watching your students and seeing them being empowered in their learning?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think that the way we like to think about it is when students are having those deep conversations, because Breakout brings out, again, like they're racing the clock, there's teamwork, there's the 4 C's, those SEL skills that are so important, that are just literally, no one's telling them, hey, you're going to work on this, like it's happening. And so as a teacher, you get to see students that may be more shy, students that may be, sometimes, look, bullying's real and all those other social dynamics in classrooms come out, but they get to observe how the students both react and also how they interact with each other. And so, I think teachers get to see different sides of their learners. It's not passive where they're sitting in class and raising their hand politely saying, I know the answer, I want to contribute. They're forced to contribute, these kids. And the teachers are literally forced to stare at them in a very different manner than traditional classes. So I think you learn a lot about your students. And I think as a teacher, you have the extra opportunity. And this is not just through Breakout, although the example will be Breakout, but I think that it can go to other things. Teachers can intercede and help to steer the learning journey and the experience based on the behavior that they're watching. Because there's more student ownership of the experience, and literally kids are taking charge. Like, teachers are not allowed to talk unless they're handed a hint card. Like, that's the rule, right? Teachers don't help. They have to observe. So
I love
you
that.
literally are forced to experience that. Oh, it's great. I mean, it is great because as a teacher, your first inclination, at least mine was to always offer help, right? Because that's your job. You're trying to teach something. So in English, I don't understand this phrasing, this preposition or whatever. And I come over, oh, no, don't worry. Don't struggle with it. Let me assist you by giving you the answer and saying, do you understand? And you'll nod your head. Here, it's literally like they have to try. And the failure, like this concept of failing as being bad. Well, in Breakout, every time you try a combination, most of the time you're wrong. Until you're right, you're wrong. So you pull on a lock and you're like, wait a minute, I am definitely wrong. But as opposed to in class where it's like, oh, I got it wrong, I still get a B, or I'm fine, and I go forward. In this, you pull on the lock and you're like given tactile feedback that you are incorrect, and yet you still persist. So I think teachers have that opportunity to kind of watch the students engage in a way and be empowered to kind of own that learning experience. And it weighs much more differently than if they were just participating in something that's slightly more passive.
I've been waiting to have this moment. I've been waiting to have this moment to talk about BreakoutEDU. I've been waiting for this moment because I've been around since the days where you had the Amazon shopping list and you could get your own Breakout box if I ordered it on Amazon, because it got so popular so fast. I cannot applaud you enough for pushing me as a teacher and an EdTech leader to hush, to zip it, and to really take a step back and just be like, let them struggle or let them succeed. Let it happen. They will tell you when you need help because you set up the assignment as such. It is a great way to push you and the students to have more agency because the roles are defined when you do a breakout. Me personally, it brings out some traits that people don't realize I have. Ooh, I'm not a good team player. Let me just go ahead and say it now. I am not. And when we do breakouts, I be the main one trying to solve everything myself. And so it forces you. The best thing I can say about a breakout is it's like a full body workout. When you go to the gym and like your whole body is worked and you're like, dang, I need a nap. That's a breakout experience. It's not just going to teach you addition and ELA and reading strategies. You are going to learn how to work with a group. You're going to learn how to not give up. You're going to learn how to say uncle, like, when you've had too much and your brain hurts and you're like, oh, I need a hint card. It really is a great example of how to just dip your toes in the water if you haven't, with student empowerment. I love a breakout.
It gives the teachers an opportunity that they may have not had before to see each individual student's strengths and weaknesses, because they're seeing them working on their own personal thing and not a group project just raising their hand. So it gives them that opportunity and an opportunity to see kind of what sparks those students and what keeps them going on certain things. I love that idea of it too.
Yeah. I mean, and the other nice thing is, like, over the years, we've developed ways to kind of keep the learning going beyond the actual game itself. So early on, we introduced something called reflection cards, and then we've recently introduced, or more recently, introduced the 4C cards. So it literally forces a conversation for the students to be introspective around, how was I a team player? What could I have done to contribute more? Which was the most challenging thing and why? Shout out to other people. So I would be like, hey, Marcus, you did a great job when you thought of this thing, even though it was wrong. You really did a great job of, like, coming up with a new idea to solve it.
They will be like, Marcus is annoying to work with. Please don't put me with Marcus again.
And you know what, to be honest with you, it facilitates questions like that, where the learner themselves and you as a participant would be like, did I let other people talk? Did I let other people try their combinations? Was I listening to other ideas? Did I share my ideas? So that's another aspect of it that I think is, like, super, super special, because in learning, we don't have that you get a Scantron graded thing back where it's like, you were right, you were wrong. And that usually is where the feedback chain ends, as opposed to, like, this experience post where it's like, you won or you didn't win, and that's fine in terms of opening up the box or finishing the digital game. What was the learning like? And so I love that. For me, that's one of my favorite moments, is watching these students kind of take a step back. They have that moment of excitement or, like, disappointment in terms of, like, so close. But then they talk about their ability to learn and their ability to share, which is super fun.
And that expands on empowering them socially and emotionally as a human, too. They're having to interact with their colleagues as they will have to for the rest of their life. The learning's
Correct.
not just them.
You have
Correct.
to learn that you're annoying. Like, I had to learn that I'm annoying in group settings. I had to learn.
I've been told.
Look, hey. If you don't learn it in that kind of safe classroom space, where else are you going to learn who you are when you work as a team? It was enlightening for me when I did my first breakout. I was like, number one, I'm dumb. Number two, I do not listen to people. Like, it really was a reflect, friend. You had people were laughing at me. I'm, like, losing it. I'm getting frustrated. I walked away at one point, just started texting. I was like, this is just, this is not my kind of thing. But it taught me that that's something I needed to grow on. It's great for adults too. Just so y'all know, it's not just for the kids.
Oh yeah. We do it at a lot of, teacher trainings, and we've done a lot of, like, administrative workshops and stuff like that. And it's great for PD days, when instead of sitting there, mandatory PD days where you have to sit there and listen, it's like, why not play a game? We have several games.
Let's
like one of them's called the Faculty Lounge. And it's literally like, if you break out, you get to go home. So, like, they're usually saved for the end of the day. And it's like, the faster you do. Yeah. So they're super fun for that. And it really lets, it focuses on learning in a very different way than I think teachers traditionally think about the learning. And organically, because I think that's a lot of the things in education. And this goes back to the tech tools that we use. This goes back to agency. This goes back to the beginning of the conversation, to say, like, prescriptive learning is a very, very, you get the recipe you're trying to make, or a variation of it. When you kind of look at what the objectives are and you backwards map it to saying, like, I'm open to a rock concert, a rock show, I'm open to someone using CAMI to do, like, audio and visual feedback versus just writing out an essay. These are the moments that allow for the students to not only shine, but kind of take control of their learning. And it's so much more meaningful, whether the product is amazing or not, as long as the teacher is open to it and the learner is encouraged to continue going. Those are those experiences that I think matter most to students.
I think that might be the bridge. The word open, that might be the bridge that takes you from engagement to empowerment. Is you could be engaging by rolling that TV in the class. All right now? Like, all right, we engaged. We are about to watch some Schoolhouse Rock. But to open things up for empowerment, you gotta like take a risk almost. You know, you really gotta let things go in a direction that you can't predict. Open up.
Yeah. Yeah, because engaged is not quiet and entertained. You know, like, and I think that those are synonyms that people think of often. You know, it can be a very passive experience. Engagement is also that moment of like true discovery, right? Like if I'm actively, and it's active versus passive engagement. I think that that's kind of just the boiled down piece of it. And there's so many things in schools that we do as pacification that seems like engagement because they're engaged in the activity, but it's not an activity that if you think of it at the higher level, it's like, oh, what was the value being brought out of that? And what did the person bring to it themselves?
Adam, I'm going to gush for a second because I look at you as an example of what it looks like to be empowered, to own what it is you're learning. I mean, you were an English teacher. You know, what English teacher do I know is doing the most like you with like Breakout, Edu Clipper? We learned it. And so my question for you is, what advice do you have for kids or adults who have big ideas but don't feel empowered to lean into them?
Again, my journey is quite accidental. And I think that that's part of that lesson, that kids don't have to say like, you know, the age old adage, I'm going to be this when I grow up. You know, you can be anything you want. And I know that that's such cliche advice, but I like to think of it, you know, I'll give you an actual story because this is literally something I told my son. My son loves Dungeons and Dragons and he wants to work for Wizards of the Coast one day. And so my advice to him was, I said, listen, he's 13. And I said, you totally can. Like, that is a totally logical thing. I said, let's go on and look at the roles that they're hiring for now and see what those skills are that they're looking for right now. And you're 13. You can get really good at absolutely anything. So if you want to be a writer or a game designer or a developer or whatever it is, backwards map what you want to be doing into the skills you need. And you may know, and of course I know that he may very well never end up in that company or that he may never end up doing that thing. But the idea of understanding that your learning journey can start with what you want to do and then really going back and learning something about it is, I think, really strong. I mean, again, it was my advice, but I think it was good advice because whether he follows up to the full extent or whether it leads him in somewhere else, the ability to kind of know what it is that you need to do and be empowered to do it, I think is really the key for all of those learners. And that kids that want to be YouTube stars and kids that want to be whatever, it's fine. Anything is possible for them to go do. They just need to put in the work and realize that it's not just luck, although that's a piece of it, but to carve out something, you need to own that. Like, you need to be hungry for it and not stop when you hit failure, because failure, you know, with Breakout, you hit a lock and you don't open it. You have to keep going or you lose the game. Life is the same way. If you're told to stop, or if you hit a wall and you're like, well, I only have 10 followers on my YouTube channel, I'm not a big YouTube success. If you stop working on it, you'll never be one. But if you keep working on it because that's your passion and that's what you're interested in, then it almost doesn't matter what level you achieve. You're still getting better along the way. And that's when I think people often disconnect. Like with kids, it's like, you're never going to get the end product. Like, I want to be a star. I want to design a game. Well, you're not going to start with designing a game. You're going to start with writing Hello World as a developer. And once you get that, you'll get a little closer. So, yeah, you know, perseverance is the most important skill for all of these learners. And it's something that school doesn't do very well. Teachers do it extremely well, but the concept of school, traditional school, does a very poor job of getting perseverance, because the end goal is like, I've done enough output to prove 100% or 85% or whatever, you know, letter grade or whatever. But for kids, having a goal that's well beyond, you know, I showed mastery of this fractional notional piece of content. And it's more about like, I wanted to do something and I did it. I wanted to write a book on something. I wanted to make a movie about something. I wanted to be a dancer or a singer. And it's not just the arts, obviously. It could be any actual, you know, I wanted to, you know, study rocks and become a geologist that knows whatever. So there's possibilities as endless. And I think that for students, it's that empowerment of saying, yes, you can. What do you need to get help with? Like, how can I assist you? And I think that that's teachers, great teachers do that really well, where they literally say, I don't know that. I'm not an expert in, being a YouTuber, but what can I do to support you? Like, I can help you find resources. I'll help you, I'll give you comments. I'll help read your scripts. I'll edit, look at your videos and give you feedback. Like, anyone can provide that type of feedback for those kids. And, I'm fortunate to say that my kids' teachers and many, many of the teachers that I know do just that. They take that extra step and they empower those kids to be more than just a participant, but to actually have empowerment over their own learning.
So is your next professional career motivational speaking? Because you I'm like, oh, that's like
I'm like, I'm gonna go do some stuff now.
Yeah. Because that was just so uplifting and amazing. So you could be a motivational speaker. I'm suggesting that to you now. Maybe I'll see you next year and you're doing it, and I'll know that I suggested it.
It's such a great tangible idea, though. Such a great you know what? I do need to look further into who I want to be, what I want to be. And there are things I could be doing today to bring myself closer to that. Little things, not even, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. Yeah. What a great way to frame how to get over that inertia, how to get over that hump and focus on empowering yourself. All right, Adam Bellow. Okay. Right now. I like that. Well, friends, I am feeling empowered. I feel like I could do anything. I am super appreciative to have Adam Bellow here. So many nuggets of information. Once again, I don't even know what to think of as a favorite. I just love the overall feeling of I can do more today. Thank you for that, Adam. Thank you.
Yeah, and I loved the idea of just because you're engaged does not mean you're empowered or interacting correctly with what you're engaging with. So in my personal life, but thinking back to students, definitely empowering them more to be engaged with what they're learning, but know what they're learning and why they're learning and love what they're learning. So thank you.
Thank you. I mean, thank you guys for asking me to come in and chat. And, I love talking to people that have a passion and are working on tools that matter to them and obviously matter to all their users. I think I told you either it was during the break or whatever, like my kids use CAMI. So, big shout out there. I love that it's a space where the people that are in it, by and large, are there for the right reasons and have, not everyone has a similar viewpoint, but I feel like that's what makes this awesome, is that everyone can bring what they're passionate about or what they're most wanting to solve or change to the equation. So it was great to chat, and thank you so much for letting me hang out with you guys.
Thank you, friend.